We are thrilled to have on the program this Good Friday one of the finest thinkers of his generation, the best-selling author of The Strange Death of Europe, The Madness of Crowds and the War on the West, Douglas Murray. Douglas, let's start with the indictment of Donald Trump in New York City. The entire circus was, as feared, entirely political. What do you make of the performance of the Manhattan DA, Alvin Bragg, who is trying to justify these charges? And he said that we cannot and will not normalise serious criminal conduct. What's your response to that?
It's amazing because during his time as DA, Alvin Bragg has normalised appalling crimes in New York City, where I'm sitting at the moment. In Alvin Bragg's tenure as DA, he has successfully diminished crime after crime. He's made serious felonies into nothing burgers, as they say here. Theft is basically allowed in stores. Store workers are told not to intervene if someone just walks out with the goods. And nobody calls the police because they know the police don't care because they're told it's not really very important. That's at the lowest level. Go up to the highest level of crime. There was a murder of a young man in Harlem just a few years ago. Alvin Bragg did a deal with two of the murderers and they got off scot-free. So it seems that in Alvin Bragg's New York, murder you can get away with. Shoplifting you can get away with easily, anytime, all the time, every day. Regard every shop in New York as a 5-finger discount buffet. But if you're Alvin Bragg and you want to make your way up the Democrat political ladder, oh, well, you can discover a historic payment of one Donald J. Trump from an account that could arguably have been used for campaign funds rather than for this particular purpose, reopen it and produce 34 very flimsy charges in order to get Donald Trump. So Alvin Bragg is, as they say, full of it. Whether or not you like Donald Trump, and I'm not his biggest fan by any means, whether or not you like Donald Trump, people should be very suspicious of a justice system that is run by politicians who are on the make.
This is going to have so many long-term consequences. I just hope the Democrats know what they have unleashed here. Now, I'm going to talk to you about Jacinda Ardern teaming up with the royal family. That's a very interesting development. But first, let's get philosophical. We see and speak so much on this station, on this program, in news in general, about trans activist madness and all sorts of issues around gender. You've argued this is not unusual for a civilization in decline to have this obsession with gender issues. Explain that to me and explain where we've seen this phenomenon before.
It was actually Camille Paglia, the distinguished feminist, who now a rather errant feminist, who first made this point. I sort of picked it up and it's been attributed to me. I can't claim full credit for it, but it is something that I've noticed as well, that at the sort of fag end of civilizations, this sort of interest in hermaphroditism, as it would have been called in the past, becomes an obsession. You see it in late Roman antiquity, late Greek antiquity. You could argue you see it in Weimar Germany, to use one of the more overused examples, but it's actually a pretty pertinent one, where basically all of these sort of norms break down. And that's why I mean, some years ago when I wrote about this in The Madness of Crowds, a small number of people even then said, why are you so het up about this thing of sex becoming gender, Douglas? Why does it matter what people identify as? And I said, well, first of all, because facts have to continue to matter. Facts have to remain the basis for all argument in our societies. And I was very struck when the trans thing first came along that it was scientist friends and others who first said to me, I can't go along with this. People who are totally uninvolved in politics until then. Why were they one of the first ones that said no? because this runs completely against the scientific method. You know, the distinguished biologist and atheist Richard Dawkins was interviewed recently, and he said, very straightforward, he said, I'm a biologist. There are two sexes. That's it. That's it. Now, unfortunately, we live in an era which pretends there aren't sexes, there's gender, and it's assigned at birth by bigoted nurses. And I think it's an example of a society that is just sort of coming apart, where really the most basic thing we know from the beginning of our lives, are we a boy or a girl? Is that person a boy or is that person a girl? The most basic thing that parents ask, are you expecting a boy or a girl? Now has become this impossible to answer question. It's an example of absolute deterioration from the bottom of society or from the top down, whichever way you look at it.
We had on our 60 Minutes in Australia a whole program seemed devoted to babies, where parents won't acknowledge the sex of their child until the child can nominate their sex at some point. So
I mean, these are parents who are not really fit. They're not really fit to be bringing up children. They're pretending they can't see basic things. They don't know basic things. These are deeply confused adults with a kind of mental illness, as far as I can see it at this stage.